Hi, you guys. Mischa Martin here with another great story about my first years as a teacher. I actually was about 6 months in, but it was right at the very beginning of teaching high school, and I was in South Central, and I didn't really have my own students yet. I was covering a class, and I had to cover it for about 2 weeks. And I had the textbook because in those days there were very, very few textbooks. There were a few lawsuits and now they have their books, but at that time there were very few. So I had the book and I'm going through this book, and the stuff was so far beyond the reading level of these kids because at that time, at least, the average reading level was second or third grade for the school as a whole. So you can imagine something like Sherlock Holmes would be completely out of the question, in addition to the fact that a lot of people had the attitude of, well, the kids aren't going to be able to identify with this. This is old white man stuff and blah blah blah, right? But a good story is a good story. So, not knowing what else to do, I just read them the story. We took about 2 weeks. I know a lot about the Victorian period, so I would stop constantly and just tell them all about, the reason the wicked uncle can get away with this is because middle class women weren't allowed to read the paper. Oh, really, miss? Yeah, they weren't even allowed. And then, or, oh, the reason she's so freaked out is because in those days, women, they didn't know anything about sex. If they were middle class, the night before they would get married, their mom would like tell them the facts of life and then just say, bite your lip and think of England. That's what would be what they got. Well, by the time we got to the end of the story, I remember some of those kids were like, man, that was such a good story. Thanks so much. That was a great story. And so I learned a lot from that. And later, then, when I had my own students, I was talking to another teacher who was brand new and had a master's in literature and was expecting to be able to impart his love for literature the way that it had worked for him as a student. Of course, it wasn't going to work that way. And he said, oh, I wouldn't even bother trying to teach these kids Outcasts of Poker Flat. I mean, they're never going to comprehend it. But again, by that time, I had my own students, and they ranged in reading levels from about fifth grade to grade level. And we took about 2 weeks, and I did the same thing. I read it to them, and I would stop and explain, okay, now these are all the stock characters you see in the westerns. Here's the drunken doctor, the gambler who's really a good guy, the uptight lady, the prostitute with a heart of gold, whatever. And when we got to the end of it, I remember this kid turned to me and said, Miss, that was a really good story. And she looked at the all the small print on the book and she said, I can't believe we read it. I feel so smart. That was a really sweet moment, you guys. That was a really sweet moment.